So I'm going to work through the special right triangles practice worksheet. First thing I did though is I got an index card and I'm just going to jot down the two special right triangles. So we have the 45, 45, 90 triangle. So 45, 45, 90 triangle. And remember that this one comes from a square, and the reason why we know that is because the legs are the same length. So if we want to think of this as being a square right here, let's focus there. So these angles are both 45-degree angles right there. And then I know that these two legs are going to be the same measurement. And by doing Pythagorean theorem, we found that the pattern is that if the legs are x, the hypotenuse will be x root 2. All right. Then we have the 30, 60, 90 triangle. So 30, 60, 90 triangle. All right, this one comes out of an equilateral triangle. So we know that because if we had an equilateral triangle, we would be able to see that these are 60-degree angles and then this is 30 degrees because it was cut in half. And then it's very obvious now that if the short leg is x, the hypotenuse is twice that because the hypotenuse is the side of the original equilateral triangle. And then using Pythagorean theorem working backwards, we found that the long leg would be x times the square root of 3. All right, so here we go. All right, first one. So if we look at this one, we can see that it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So I know that the legs are going to be the same length. So I know that this one is going to be 30 also. And then I know that the hypotenuse, the pattern is that the hypotenuse is the leg times the square root of 2. So this one is going to be 30 root 2. All right, next up, this one's a 30, 60, 90. And if it's easier, we can turn the paper that way so we can follow along. So this time we were given the side with the square root of 3. So what we need to do is divide this by the square root of 3. But doing that means actually, if you remember the shortcut that I showed you in the video, if we divide this by 3 and then attach the square root of 3 to it, that will give us the short leg. And then the hypotenuse is going to be twice this measurement, which makes the hypotenuse 30 square root 3. So the x is 30 root 3 and the y is 15 root 3. All right, here we go with another 30, 60, 90. So this is the short leg. So if this is the short leg, I know the hypotenuse is going to be twice that measurement. So that makes the hypotenuse 42. And then the long leg is going to be, and again, the short leg is x, the long leg is that times the square root of 3, which makes this 21 root 3. So x is 42 and y is 21 root 3. All right, next up. So I can tell that this one is a 45, 45, 90 because the legs are the same length. So that tells me that the hypotenuse is that square root of 2. So 37 root 2, and there's no y on this one. All right, we got a 30, 60, 90. Okay, I know the long leg, and I know this is the long leg because this angle is the bigger angle. So to get from the long leg to the short leg, we have to go backwards. So, and then if you want to look at the card, so this is what the 48 is. So we need to divide this by 3 and then multiply by square root of 3. So that will give us the short leg, and then the hypotenuse is twice the short leg. So this one will be 32 square root of 3. So this one is 32 root 3, and this one is 16 root 3. All right, another 30, 60, 90. This time we know the hypotenuse. So if the hypotenuse is 46, I know the short leg is going to be half of that, which would be 23. And then the long leg is going to be that times the square root of 3. So we have 23 for the short leg and 23 root 3 for the long leg. Next up, 45, 45, 90. So I know the hypotenuse, which is the one that typically has the root 2 on it. So to go backwards, I need to divide this by 2 and then include the root. And those two are going to be the same. So 21 root 2 and 21 root 2. All right, number 8, 30, 60, 90. All right, so if this is the hypotenuse, then this side is going to be the hypotenuse over 2. So I am okay with doing that. I know that you guys would rather write 19.5, but and then our long leg is going to be this times the square root of 3. So we can say that, or we could say that. So the y is 19.5, and then the x, I'm going to do a combination of both fraction and decimal. All right, next up, 45, 45, 90. So I know these legs are the same, so those are both 25. And then the hypotenuse is the leg square root of 2. All right, this one, let's turn it around so we can kind of see what's going on here. So this is the short leg, this is the hypotenuse, and then the short leg. So if I take the hypotenuse and divide by 2, I will get the short leg. So if we take 47 and divide it by 2, so we can just write it like that. Or, again, I know some of you would rather write it as a decimal. And then the long leg is going to be that times the square root of 3. So we can say 23.5 square root of 3, or this one would be 47 over 2. All right, here's a 45, 45, 90. So these legs are the same. I know what the hypotenuse is, so I need to go backwards. So the trick to going backwards, because I know that the 52 should be with the square root of 2. So to divide, I need to go backwards. So I need to divide 52 by 2 and then attach the square root of 2. And those legs are the same. All right, this one, 30, 60, 90. I know the short leg. So to get from the short leg to the hypotenuse, I just need to multiply by 2, which would give me 30 root 3. And to get from the short leg to the long leg, I need to multiply by square root of 3, which is going to give me 45. So here's how I know that. If I take the the short leg and multiply it by the square root of 3, that's going to be 15 square root 9, which is 15 times 3, which is 45. So I know that the long leg is 45 and the hypotenuse is 30 root 3. All right, moving on. Next up, 45, 45, 90. So these legs are the same, which makes this 14 and the hypotenuse 14 root 2. 30, 60, 90. So I know the long leg because that's opposite from the 60. So if the long leg is 9, then I need to divide by 3 and then plot root 3, and then hypotenuse is times 2. So the hypotenuse is 6 root 3, and the short leg is 3 root 3. All right, here's another 30, 60, 90. So I know the short leg. So the hypotenuse is going to be twice that. So I know that's going to be 5. And then the long leg is going to be this times the square root of 3. So 2.5 root 3. All right. Next up, so 30, 60, 90, I know the hypotenuse, so to go backwards, I need to divide by 2. So on this one, I would not actually write it like that because that, looks crazy. So what I would do for this one instead would be to write it as, as a decimal since it started as a decimal. And then we know that the long leg is going to be that times the square root of 3. So the short leg is 11.8, and then the long leg is 11.8 root 3. All right, this one I know is 45, 45, 90. The legs are the same, which means that the hypotenuse is just the leg square root of 2. All right, here's another 30, 60, 90. I know the long leg. Going backwards, that means I need to divide by 3 and then use the square root of 3. And then the hypotenuse is twice that, which would make it 16 root 3 over 3. So 8 root 3 over 3 and 16 root 3 over 3. All right, 45, 45, 90. So these are the same length. I know this. I need to go backwards. So going backwards on a 45, 45, 90 triangle means dividing by 2 and then using square root of 2, which would be the same as 12.5 root 2. So those are the same length because the legs are congruent. All right. 30, 60, 90, we know the hypotenuse, so going backwards, I know that the short leg is going to be half that, and then the long leg will be the short leg square root of 3. So 6 square root of 3 and 6. All right, 45, 45, 90, the legs are the same length, so I knew that that one is 20, and then the hypotenuse is going to be the leg square root of 2. All right, this one, 30, 60, 90 triangle. So this is the short leg. So the short leg times 2 will give me the long leg. So that would be 15.6. And then the short leg times square root of 3 is the long leg. So I know this one is 15.6. And then the long leg is 7.8 root 3. All right, next up, so those two are the same length. This is the hypotenuse, so going backwards, I need to divide that by 2 and then use the square root of 2, and those two are the same. So 21 root 2 and 21 root 2. All right, last one, 30, 60, 90. So this one, we know the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse to the short leg, I need to just divide by 2. So that makes that 15. And then the long leg is going to be the short leg times square root of 3. So the x is 15. And then the long leg, which is the y, is 15 root 3. All right, hope that helps.